Assalamualaikum and good morning to Sir Shazid and to our fellow classmates. Today, my partner and I are going to present Region 10, that is North America, which is also the last region for this subject. But before we start with our presentation, let us introduce ourselves first. Next.
Sorry. My name is Christina Kaida Miti Rizal.
And my name is Nur Fatini binti Muhammad Rasli. Alright, next. Alright, so as you can see, here is where Region 10 is located in the world map. Now let's have a closer look at the map for Region 10. Next. Alright, so as you can see here, the green colored area indicates Canada, meanwhile the blue colored area indicates United States. You guys can also refer to textbook page 530 for further references. So let's begin with the introduction to North America. In general, there are two countries in North America, which is Canada and United States. North America is bordered to the north by the Arctic Ocean, to the east by the Atlantic Ocean, to the southeast by South America and the Caribbean Sea, and to the west and south by the Pacific Ocean. North America covers an area of about 24,709,900 square kilometers, which are 16.5% of the Earth's land area and about 4.8% of its total surface. North America is also the third largest continent by area, following Asia, Africa, and is the fourth by population after Asia, Africa, and Europe. As of 2021, the population is estimated at nearly 371 million people, which is equivalent to 4.73% of the world's population. Next is climate. Next. So there are three types of climate in Northern America. Now let's have a look at the first climate, which is the boreal climate. So what is the boreal climate? Boreal climate is the climate that is associated with the boreal forest zone of Eurasia, where it can extend to 50 degrees in North America. In this climate, winters are long and cold with temperatures below 6 Celsius for 6 to 9 months, and summers are short with temperatures averaging more than 10 Celsius. In North America, it covers most of the inland of Canada, Alaska, and parts of the northern contiguous in United States. Next.
I will continue to the dry climates. So basically, about 1/3 of North America, including the high Arctic latitudes, has a dry climate. The dry areas lie in the American Southwest, such as Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, and El Paso metropolitan regions, where a combination of the mid-latitude high pressure belt, the tropical continental air mass, and rain shadow effects behind the high Sierra Nevada has led to the lack of rainfall. The high Arctic areas are dry because most of the open water, which could act as a source of moisture, is frozen for 6 to 9 months of the year, and because the cold air that dominates the regions can hold little moisture, and it has a very little precipitations, high rates of evaporation, and generally suppress rain, and large temperatures change every day and seasonally. Desert heights may be about 40 degrees Celsius or more, and the winter wind lows may possibly the freeze in certain places. Next is the polar climate. The polar climate is low freezing temperature is icy, and most of the tak nampak slide ke?
Nampak?
Tekan I. Sorry.
Dekat
I spell it.
natural
Sembilan.
hazard. Dekat natural hazard.
Okay. Okay. Polar climate. Climate is a low freezing temperature which is icy and most of the time is snowy due to the lack of direct daylight. And like other regions in the world, the location of Arctic or North Pole is made up of the frozen Arctic oceans. And the South Pole, an example of South Pole is on the Antarctic continent with land that is covered with frozen ice too. And when there is summer in North Pole, they the temperature in there is negative 32 degrees Celsius, and when there is winter in North Pole is negative 40 degrees Celsius, and and we and in the South Pole, which is Antarctic, the temperature in there is negative 18 degrees Celsius, and when in the winter season, the South Pole is negative 76 degrees Celsius, which we can see that the South Pole is more colder than the North Pole. Why? It is because the poles are polar opposites with each other, and the Arctic is ocean surrounded by land, and the Antarctic is land surrounded by the ocean. So when the ocean under the Arctic ice is cool, but there is still warmer than the ice. So the ocean warms the air a bit. And then we move on to the natural hazard in North Americas. Firstly, the hurricanes. Hurricanes is a type of storm that called of tropical or subtropical waters named as tropical cyclones. If the highest winds of a storm hit 74 mph, the zone affected will endanger the mid and southern Atlantic and the Gulf Coast states. And the hurricane seasons usually begins on June 1 at the end of November 30. However, hurricanes can occur outside of that time frame also. There is a scale that called the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale, it is a rating of 1 to 5 category. This scale is based on a hurricane's maximum sustained wind speed. Hence, if the category is high or more high, thus the greater the risk of property destruction from the storm. It does only scale a hurricane storm and do not take into an account other potentially hazard like rainfall, flooding, or tornadoes. Basically, if the scale is showing category 3 or more, uh, it is known as a major hurricanes, and the major hurricanes will cause devastating to catastrophic wind damage and significant loss of life. This hazard require people to take protective actions and including evacuating from areas vulnerable to storm surge. Next, the Hurricane Dorian is happened in 24 August to 10 September 2019, which is the Hurricane Dorian is the most powerful storm that hit Bahamas. There was the resultant damage to this island was catastrophic. Most structures were flattened or swept to the sea, and at least 70,000 people were left homeless, and 77 direct deaths being noted, with many more missing days following the storms. The island have gone about 3 days of strong wind, rain, and seawater flooding from the Category 5 hurricanes, which after it ravaged through the Bahamas, Dorian proceeds along the coast of the southern United States and Atlantic Canada, leaving behind considerable damage and economic loss in those regions. Next is the tornadoes. Tornadoes looks like a spinning funnel-shaped cloud that spread to the ground with spinning winds that may exceed 300 miles per hour. Also can uproot trees, damage buildings, and convert innocuous things into deadly projectiles. Also, it may ruin neighborhood in just a short time. The tropical storms and hurricanes may accompany tornadoes once on a land with well-defined radar thunderstorms, including hail, strong winds, lightning, and flash floods. Next is the peak the peak tornado occurrence in March to May, and the peak months not in most states are late in June to August. The affected area of these tornadoes is Great Plain of central U.S. area and the Tornado Alley. One of the causes of the storm that we know is when the dry cold air moving south from Canada meets the warm moist air traveling north from the Gulf of Mexico. The United States has the most tornadoes of the country, as well as the strongest and most violent tornadoes. Uh, and the large portion of these tornadoes form in an area of the central United States, popularly known as the Tornado Alley. And Canada experienced the second most tornadoes also, which is, for example, is the Ontario and the Prairie Province. See the highest frequency, particularly with southward extents. And for example of these tornadoes that happen in the United States of a of a city in Nashville, Tennessee. It happened in 3 March of 2020. There is a severe storms and tornadoes have ripped across the U.S. states of Tennessee, shredding at least 40 buildings, causing severe damage in the state capital and killing at least 19 people. The severity of tornadoes is commonly measured by the enhanced Fujita scale, which scales tornado intensity from EF0 to EF5 by wind speeds and the amount of damage that they do to human environments. These judgments are made after the tornado has dissipated and the damage trail is carefully studied by weather professionals. Next is the river floods. River flooding can be the consequence of severe rain, quick snow melting, ice jams, and which occur during a flood of river or streams beyond their natural banks and typically inundate dry area. Also, it commonly occurs in late winter and early spring. For example, of the affected area, the whole of the United States territory dramatically fills dry stream beds in the west and in regions following an unexpected rainfall. For example, in 20 March 2020, there are at least 8 people have died and dozens were evacuated or rescued after flash floodings in parts of Ohio and Indiana of USA. Following days of heavy rain, tragedy occurred in Indiana when floodwaters damaged roads and a bridge over Sands Creek in Laurel, Franklin County. Floodwater swept away several vehicles from the bridge. The local authorities reports that 6 people died in that accident. So next is the I will pass it to the Fatini.
Alright, so the fourth natural hazard is lightning. Lightning is an electrical discharge caused by imbalances between storm clouds and the ground, or within the clouds themselves. Most lightning occurs within the clouds during a storm. Colliding particles of rain, ice, or snow inside storm clouds increase the imbalance between storm clouds and the ground. and often negatively charge the lower reaches the storm clouds. Objects on the ground like buildings, trees, and the earth itself become positively charged, which creates an imbalance that nature seeks to remedy by passing current between the two charges. Although lightning affects all regions in the United States, the southeastern states are most at risk. Next. Lightning generally decreases from the southeast to the northwest, except for a few places such as the Rocky Mountains, where topography causes regular thunderstorms during the summer. Alabama, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Missouri, New Jersey, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas have the most lightning deaths and injuries. Florida is considered the lightning capital of the country with more than 2,000 lightning injuries over the past 50 years. Seasonally, lightning can occur during any time of the year, but lightning casualties are highest during summer. July is generally the month with the most lightning. Lightning strikes often occur in the afternoon. In fact, two-thirds of all lightning casualties occur between noon and 6 p.m. Next is severe winter storm. Severe winter storm are also known as blizzard, where it is defined by the strength of the winds rather than the amount of snow it brings. With wind speeds at above 35 miles per hour, blizzards create blowing snow conditions where snow on the ground is picked up by the wind, causing reduced visibility and the accumulation of snowdrifts. A blizzard can last for 3 or more hours and often leads to the accumulation of lots of snow, either as new snowfall or as redistribution of previously fallen snow as blowing snow. For a blizzard to form, warm air must rise over cold air. There are two ways that this may happen. Winds pull cold air towards the equator from the poles and bring warm air towards the poles from the equator. When warm air and cold air are brought together, a front is formed and precipitation occurs. Warm air can also rise to form clouds and blizzard snows as it flows up a mountainside. The February 2021 North American cold wave was an extreme weather event that brought record cold temperatures to a significant portion of Canada, the United States, and parts of northern Mexico during the first half of February 2021. The cold was caused by a southern migration of the polar vortex, which is likely caused by a sudden stratospheric warming event that occurred the prior month. Temperatures fell as much as 25 to 50 Fahrenheit, which is below average as far south as the Gulf Coast. Severe winter storms also associated with the bitter cold, which allowed for heavy snowfall and ice accumulations to place as far south as Houston, Texas, and contributing to one of the snowiest winters ever in some areas in the deep south. Next is earthquakes, volcanoes. Next is earthquakes, volcanoes. Now, earthquake volcanoes are also known as a volcanotectonic earthquake, which is an earthquake caused by the movement of magma beneath the surface of the earth. The movement results in pressure changes where the rock around the magma has experienced stress. At some point, this stress can cause the rock to break or move. All volcanoes in Canada, All volcanoes in Canada and in the contiguous states of the United States of America are listed that have had volcanic activity within the past 10,000 years or are still considered to be active. In the 20th century, there are only two eruptions, which is the last one in 1915, and the most famous volcanic eruption, which is the Mount St. Helens in 1980, and since the turn of the century, only St. Helens has been active between 2004 until 2008. Most volcanic Volcanoes of Canada and USA are located along the west coast and related to the subduction of the Pacific Plate under the continental North American tectonic plate. The world's largest eruption of the 20th century occurred in 1912 at Novarokta in the Alaska Peninsula. An estimated 15 cubic kilometers of magma was explosively erupted during 60 hours beginning on June 6th. This volume is equivalent to 230 years of eruption at Kilauea, Hawaii, or about 30 times the volume erupted by Mount Saint Helens, Washington in 1980. Next.
Okay, I will continue to the Dust Bowl disaster. The Dust Bowl was a period of severe dust storms that greatly damaged the ecology and agriculture of the American and Canadian prairies during the 1930s. This disaster happened because of the plowing of subhumid grasslands in western Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. It happened when winds blew away the dried final soil particles and left piles of sand behind the dust. Dust suffocate the livestock and will cause the pneumonia, especially for the children. Also, due to the failure to apply dry land farming methods, worsen the drought effects, killing the crops that keep soil in place. For your information, the drought is an event of prolonged shortage in the water supply. And it is become more worse. The dust clouds blew all the way to the Washington D.C., New York City, and many other cities in the east. The drought and dust can have a substantial impact on the ecosystems and agriculture that it will destroy a large part of U.S. agriculture production. The Dust Bowl also made the Great Depression even worse. It was a severe worldwide economic depression that took place in 1930s also, beginning in the United States. The Great Depression is commonly used as an example of how intensely the global economy can be declined. And the latest drought happens in the US is within 2012 with several weeks in a row of 100 plus degrees days in many regions. And as it result was a drought condition for two-thirds of the country, the economist estimates that the dry spell cost Americans some $50 billion in agricultural losses. Staple crops including soy, corn, and wheat have all been devastated, as well as forest fire destruction and other financial casualties. And next is the Colorado River. This river is one of the principal rivers that provide a water supply source for humans and nature, and it located in the southwestern United States and northern Mexico. It is a drainage basin covers for 637,000 square kilometers, includes parts of 7 states, which are Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, and California. And the Colorado River surface water volumes allocates in 1922, and it were based on some of the wettest year on record. The compact allocates more surface water than it is in the system in an average year. And in the last 70 years, the Colorado River Basin states have grown faster than most of other states in the nations, and several are projected to continue on this trajectory. Also, water from aquifers, and the Colorado River facilitate the expansion of farming into areas of the southwestern United States. And not forget also, the groundwater is also hugely important in the Colorado River basins. Groundwater provides best flow to rivers and streams, supports groundwater-dependent ecosystem, serves as the primary source of drinking water for many rural communities, and it also plays a key role in water supply balance. So there is competition and controversy that been erupted between the local states over the use of fresh water and the depletion of groundwater resources. And then next is the natural burning. Natural burning is the natural fires usually starts with a natural cause of lightning, which is extremely tiny because of spontaneous combustion of dry material such as sapwoods and leaf. And human activity can be also the cause of the wildfire ignitions, including the smoking, recreation equipment, and miscellaneous. The settlement in arid areas where natural burning cycles frequently occur in the vegetation presents a growing hazard. And the wildfire affected areas such as Los Angeles Basin, there is the business and homes may be consumed by fire in a matter of minutes. The California climate has always been fire prone also because of climate change. One of the causes of the climate change such as global warming that is driven by the human induced emissions of greenhouse gases and the resulting large scale shift in weather patterns. Conclude that we know no doubt that climate has such a powerful influence on wildfire. And for example of the issues that happened in 2019, there is 275 wildfire that have been broken out across the California because of the company that named Pacific Gas and Electrico that had failed to modernize its equipment and services. The most destructive year on record was in 2018 when the 8,500 wildfire scorched through the states and killing around 100 people. And then I will pass it to Fatin to continue.
Alright, so next is mining. So mining is the process of extraction of uh, mining is the process of extraction of valuable minerals, ores, or other geological materials from the earth. There are different types of mining depending upon the techniques employed in the extraction of the minerals. One of the type of mining is surface mining, where it is a form of mining in which the surface soil and rocks covering the mineral deposits are removed. This method is ideal when the coal seams or mineral deposits are closer to the surface. Surface mining is highly destructive to the ecosystem, but it is preferred by most industries due to the lower labor requirements and higher yields, especially coal as compared to undergrounding mining. Mining also causes barren land, where the damaged and contaminated land are left behind after mining, which stays barren for a long period of time. The reclamation and rehabilitation process of these lands are slow and cost-intensive. The most common type of mining in North America is coal mining. Coal remains a primary industry for the United States and is often linked with states near the Appalachians. Coal is a type of sedimentary rock found deep underground, formed from the remains of ancient plants. When burned, coal is an excellent source of energy and is mostly used as fuel for electricity generating power plants. Coal can be mined underground or in large open pits. Next. Next is ground level ozone. So ground level ozone is a colorless and highly irritating gas that forms just above the Earth's surface. It is created by chemical reactions between oxides of nitrogen and volatile organic compounds in the presence of sunlight. Nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compounds come from natural sources as well as human activities. About 95% of nitrogen oxide come from human activities such as emissions from industrial facilities and electric utilities, motor vehicle exhaust, gasoline vapors, and chemical solvents are some of the major sources of nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compounds. Breathing ozone can trigger a variety of health problems, including chest pain, coughing, throat irritation, and congestion. It can worsen bronchitis, emphysema, and asthma. Ground level ozone also can reduce lung function and inflame the linings of the lungs. Repeated exposure may permanently scar lung tissue. In North America, cities like Washington, D.C., Baton Rouge, and Los Angeles are highly affected by the ozone smoke that are emitted from the vehicle's exhaust gas and thermal power plant. Next. Okay. Acid rain is caused by a chemical reaction when compounds such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide are released into the air. Power plants that line the Ohio River Valley create a blanket at smoke that covers the region. It is derived from power plant emissions affected trees and caused rivers and lakes downwind in the northern eastern United States and eastern Canada to become more acidic. Air pollution along the Ohio River is worse than on the East Coast with sustainable exposure. It affects a wide variety of other terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems as well as cultural and material resources. Air pollution such as sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide can cause respiratory diseases or worse. Asthma or chronic bronchitis make it hard for people to breathe.
I will continue to the subtopic 5 of regional history and culture. Firstly, we move on to the emergence of a region. North America and its indigenous population were largely unknown to the rest of the world before Columbus' expedition beginning in 1492. The indigenous peoples lived in societies that do activities such as agriculture, hunting, trade, and community-based resource-sharing civilizations. As we know, European settlers such as French, Spanish, British, Dutch, Russian, and Swedish has become a succession of possessions and territories in North America after they have explored the region globally, and there the global connection with the indigenous peoples have been made. By those explorations, it attracted the interest of indigenous people, and they, overwhelmed by the cultural hegemony or forced conversion to the many technologies of their social traditions. Moreover, the British were the dominant force in the middle of the 1700 centuries. Fortunately, the South settlers signing the 1776 of Declaration of Independence as they strive to establish the independence of USA. Also, Canada, where it originates largely from the earliest colonial areas founded on the St. Lawrence and Great Lakes, and was a British colony considerably longer than the USA. Through the British North America Act, Canada achieved independence in 1867, as maintained their ties with Britain in 1982. We move on to the Native Americans. The Native Americans is the group of indigenous people who are lived in North America for centuries before the European settlement. The first American probably migrated from Siberia to Alaska over 20,000 years ago. By AD 1500, they lived in hierarchically structured ethnic groups called tribes. They adapt in culture and distribution to the physical environment. The combination of natural resources, habitat, and a sedentary settlement structure has allowed communities like the Mississippi to prosper throughout the centuries in southern Illinois. For instance, communities in the eastern forest that live in village settlements, they grow some corn, beans, and squash, and they also do activities like hunting and fishing. In Mississippi Valley natchez, which is have a warmer lower climate, they use a surplus from farming to support urban development. Also, there is a hunting group, namely as Dakota, inhabited the prairie environment on the plains between Mississippi River and the Rocky Mountains and killed bison to supply food, clothing, and shelter needs. In order to hunting the bison, they would move their tents as to follow the herds of the bison, which is we known as a buffalo. Moreover, the Spanish colonists introduced to the Native Americans about how to facilitate horses for them to do hunting, travel for hunting best societies. Tribal numbers were sparse farther west in more arid part of the mountain and more colder parts of northern forest. There is some location in the arid southwest favored the development of irrigation farming and the building of distinctive villages by the Pueblo cultures. Along the Pacific coast from northern California to southern Alaska, small tribes fish plentiful seafood including salmon and tuna. They do activities of carving a tree and get the wood and make it into a canoes, plant houses, and totem poles. Also, small numbers group of the tribe like Aleuts and Inuits who hunt and fish the nearby at the nearby ocean are being supported by the continents of the Arctic and Pacific coast. After the arrival of Europeans, many Native Americans were killed by the spread of disease which they had no immunity in their body to fight the disease. The disease such as smallpox, influenza, malaria, fever, and typhoid. Therefore, the survivors were increasingly pushed to the marginal lands of the region. This process began in 1660s from the east and southwest and lasts until 1880s in the central and northwestern parts of the North America. Next, I will explain about the European settlers. The European colonization of the Americas took place in the Americas during the age of exploration between about 1500 CE and 1800 CE. During this time period, several European empires, primarily Spain, Sweden, Britain, the Netherlands, Russia, and France, began to explore and claim the natural resources and human capital of the Americas, resulting in the establishment of several settler colonial states. When we look at the France from the early 1500 centuries, the French settlers settled the mouth of the St. Lawrence River in present-day of Canada. They established farm settlements along the banks of the St. Lawrence Valley. French explorers include such as Henry Hudson and Samuel de Champlain who explored the region of Canada, he re-established it as a new France. The Spanish settlers settled parts of present-day of Colorado, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Florida, and Carolinas. When areas such as southern North America did not deliver the gold that they hoped for, the Spanish left much of the land to be cared for by Roman Catholic missions or to be used for cattle ranches. Next, the British colonization began in the 17th century with failed attempts on Roanoke Island, which is known as North Carolina by England, to establish permanent colonies in the north. The first permanent British colony was established in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. They first targeted the tidewater lands surrounding the Chesapeake Bay for colonial development, which they found an opportunities to make tobacco cultivation as the climate and landforms in there are well suited. The settlers also adopt Native American crops for subsistence. Tobacco sales in England brought more colonizers and the British authorities became a crown colony over the land. This early success led to the spread of plantation and settlements in the south along the coastal Atlantic sand. A wide range of communities including indigo, rice, sugarcane, and cotton have been grown. Next, in 1620 centuries, a group of Puritans, which is known as religious freedom-seeking migrants from England on their way to Virginia, brought a second permanent colony on the Cape Cod in present-day Massachusetts and moved across the bay to Plymouth, beginning the settlement of the region that became known as New England. Other groups followed and established a community-based township settlement structure on self-governing village and subsistence economy. New England community orientation contrasts with the individual family-owned plantation of the southern settlers which produced fewer towns. One decade after, which is in 1630s, Dutch became the first to settle in the Middle Atlantic between New England and Virginia around the port town of New Amsterdam. In 1660s, British drove the Dutch from their settlement in New Netherlands because the British wanted to control the Atlantic coast of North America. He wanted more settlement, and then they used more land rich in natural resources and control of the fur trade. The British Duke of York received charge of the Dutch territories and changed its name from the city of New Amsterdam to present day of New York. By selling most of his holdings to William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania, he paid off his war and land purchase debt. In this region of the Middle Atlantic, there were settlers who wanted to establish the least external controlled family residence in a new country. In 1700 centuries, many Scots, Irish, and Germans came to the region. They came to establish industry of agriculture systems such as growing corn and raising livestock and spreading it southward along the Appalachian valleys. In 1783, as new lands were acquired after the independence, the three settlement areas along the Atlantic coast became springboards for the thousands of people tobacco relocate to the west in US as fresh land was obtained. And the plantation was first found in Virginia's Tidewater and was subsequently extended to south and southwestward along lowlands of the Gulf to Texas with a company of slave use. The geographical dissemination of these early disparities contribute in part to north-south tensions leading to the Civil War in 1860s.
Next is the wealth of natural resources in terms of primary products and new lands. It happened because of the long warm summers of the widening coastal plain from New York. Because of this, it has encouraged the commercial farming of subtropical crops, for example, tobacco, sugarcane, rice, and indigo and cotton. In 1850, the United States tripled its land by buying land from France and acquired the western third by negotiation and military conquest. It is to ensure the rapid occupation of these new areas, land was surveyed and sold by the US government at lower price. The Homestead Act of 1862 provided families with very inexpensive or free farmland. Settlers spread to the vast interior plains and tackled challenges that include clearing vegetation, marking boundaries, raising buildings, creating roads, and buying livestock and seeds. Families are able to overcome the expense of starting farms in the interior, and they can take advantage of the fertile soils and the warm, moist summer climate, a combination that provided ideal for growing corn and wheat and raising cattle and pigs. And then from the early 1800s, the US exported a range of farm produce to Europe, competing directly with European farmers in bulk grain markets, as well to continue to export crops such as cotton and tobacco that could not be grown in Northern Europe. Next. Next is the resources for US manufacturing. The independence had motivated Americans to establish their own manufacturing factories, providing goods that were at first not obtainable from the Britain. Textiles, metal goods, and leather goods were among the first industries to develop powered by water mills in New England, New Jersey, and eastern Pennsylvania. In 1800, coal in eastern Pennsylvania and around Pittsburgh are being replaced by iron, making as it set off further industrial revolution. The manufacturing belt, Rust Belt Factory Belt. It is a region of the northeastern and midwestern United States, which initially developed based on the regional sources of coal, iron, and the agriculture produce of the Midwest. Later, it drew in mineral resources from other parts of the country. In the 1900s, the available of natural resources combined with the utilization of rivers for irrigation, navigation, and hydroelectricity, and discoveries of oil and natural gas drew more people and manufacturing corporations southward and westward from the country's core. Although the emphasis of most Americans on the natural resources was on the economic gain, the federal government was persuaded to lay off huge sections of beautiful wilderness and historic locations as national parks by influential group of the late 1800s. Next. Next is human resources. North America is rich in human resources, and one of them is new people means new skills. Over 30 million people legally migrated from Northern and Western Europe to the United States between 1820 and 1957. The majority of these immigrants came from British Isles, with over 4.6 million immigrants coming from the island of Ireland and over 4.5 million from Great Britain. As these immigrants are initially from Northwest Europe, they brought European culture traditions, individual skills, and indicatives. The period with the highest levels of migration from Northwest Europe to the US was in the 1880s. As the Long Depression increased, industrialization and harsh winters continued to weaken Europe's agriculture sector, prompting many to migrate to the US in search of economic opportunities there. However, there was a huge gap within the developing United States for a variety of ethnically, nationality, and religiously diverse groups to establish themselves. For example, Africans are forced to migrate to the region to serve primarily as slaves in the agriculture industry, and it still remained the target of debilitating discrimination, even after the Civil War had happened in 1861 until 1865 that guaranteed their freedom. Next.
I will explain in the education and technology of North America. Firstly, the United States of education is began in 19th centuries. Under the democratic constitution, the United States sought to develop conditions in which its whole citizens could flourish by creating their freedoms. And the US established compulsory education much earlier than the European countries, as its emphasis on technology transfer began in the late 1800s, and for their land grants for establishing engineering, farming universities in many states. The first public school in the US was established in 1821, and then in 1867, the education in the US received a major boost as the Department of Education was established. One of the donators for the education in North America is George Peabody, which he donated $2 million to help for public education in the South. And there also established a university for African American students that is called Howard University. And by 1870, the public schools were present in every state, with secondary public schools outnumbering the private schools. However, 3 years later, in 1873, an economic depression hurt formal education, as it effects of many schools are closed because they are lack of funds to staff the school with teachers and supplies. Next is the management of manufacturing in North America. These natural and human resources are, along with innovative manufacturing structure and process, quickly brought the United States prominence in the world economy activity by the late 1800s. The expanding internal market of the US provided the demands that stimulate many of the developments. Americans achieved economies of scale by building larger factories for increased output. Um, they used horizontal integration, which occurred when financial brought out several producers of the same product, giving the new owners a large share of the total production of goods and enabling them to set for market price. For vertical integration took this process further by uniting the producers of product inputs with the product manufactured in a single corporate structure. As an example of this process, Andrew Carnegie built the largest steel mills to gain economies of scale, then he bought out other steel makers in a time of economic recession in the 1870s to integrate the steel industry horizontally. In the next phase of this vertical integration scheme, he purchased both coal and iron mines that provide the raw materials and the heavy engineering corporation that use of the steel. And in 1900s, the Carnegie's United States steel corporations dominate the industry. Henry Ford then took the concept of the factory production line to a new level. He applied it to the assembly of a wide range of components in the production of automobiles. His co-produced thousands of limited numbers of models for a growing market. His methods called as a Fordism were widely adopted by other industries and in other countries. The, mechani- the mechanization of production was another feature that made the US the world leader in output of manufactured goods by the mid-1900s.
Next is organization in North America, which is NAFTA. um, so NAFTA actually stands for North American Free Trade Agreement. Now let's take a look at the history of NAFTA. So NAFTA was inspired by the success of European Economic Community in eliminating tariffs in order to stimulate trade among its members. The purpose of NAFTA was to reduce trading costs, increase business investment, and help North America to be more competitive in the global marketplace. The agreement was among Canada, the United States, and Mexico. In June 1990, Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari requested a free trade agreement with the US. In September 1990, Reagan's successor, President George H.W. Bush, began negotiations with President Salinas for a liberalized trade agreement among Mexico, Canada, and the United States in 1992. NAFTA was signed by outgoing President George H.W. Bush, Mexican President Salinas, and Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. Earlier that year, the European Union had been created by the Treaty of Maastricht. Preliminary agreement on the pact was reached in August 1992, and it was signed by the three leaders on December 17. NAFTA was ratified by the three countries' national legislatures in 1993 and went into effect on January 1st, 1994. Next is the provisions and features of NAFTA. One of it is to reduce barriers. Reducing barriers means to abolish tariffs on import and exports within 15 years of implementation. Approximately 50% of the tariffs were abolished immediately when the agreement took effect, and the remaining tariffs were targeted for gradual elimination. Among the areas specifically covered by NAFTA are construction, engineering, accounting, advertising, consulting management, architecture, healthcare management, commercial education, and tourism. Next is national goods status. Local governments are legally prohibited to impose tariffs on such goods. One of the key provisions of NAFTA is to provide national goods status to products imported from other NAFTA countries, which means that no state, provincial, or local governments could impose taxes or tariffs on those goods. Next is establish commissions. Under those agreements, the three countries agreed to establish commissions to handle labor and environmental issues. The commissions have the power to impose steep fines against any of the three governments that failed to impose its laws consistently. Environmental and labor groups from both the United States and Canada, however, have repeatedly charged that the regulations and guidelines detailed in these supplemental agreements have not been enforced. Next is a protection to secure intellectual property right. Increased protection of intellectual property rights. NAFTA stipulated that for the first time, Mexico had to provide a very high level of protection for intellectual property rights. This is especially helpful in fields such as computer software and chemical production. For instance, Mexican firms will no longer be able to steal intellectual property from companies and create a Mexican version of a product. Hence, these rights makes the participants countries would respect patents, trademarks, and copyrights, especially to protect small businesses. Lastly is the certificate of origin to claim tariffs. A certificate of origin is a document that is widely used in international trade transactions, which attests that the product listed therein has met certain criteria to be considered as originating in a particular country. For instance, product made from Uruguay but is shipped from United States will still need to pay duty when it enters Mexico or Canada, even if they do not ask for the certificate.
I will explain about the supporters' claim of this agreement. For there is many reasons for for the people that who support the NAFTA. Firstly, for its equal treatment of business opportunities for all companies throughout the region, because it opened up the Mexican markets to US companies. The Mexican market is growing rapidly, which promise more export opportunities, which in turn means more jobs for the Mexicans. And the supporters, though, had a difficult time to convincing the American public for the NAFTA that they are have more good than the harm. And their main effort centered on convincing people that all consumers benefit from the widest possible choice of products at the lowest possible price, which means the consumers will get the biggest beneficiaries of lowered trade barriers. Moreover, NAFTA also promote democracy and political stability as well as strengthen the Mexican economy. It has increased in its efficiency of Mexican market, include of open up new opportunities for small and mid-sized business. The taxes on export goods to Mexico is at 30% or higher, were quite prevalent and required some time due to the processing of paperwork. On average, 250% Mexico tariff on products made from US, which is greater than the US duties on Mexican items. And by negotiating this past agreement, the NAFTA has resolved an identified problem. Without the tariff-free imports from Mexico, US food costs are probably higher. And the NAFTA also affect about how small business are doing. For the Mexican market is growing rapidly nowadays because whoever wanted to do business in Mexico must have to establish a physical presence. For example, the US service provider that want to do business in Mexico must have their own shop at there. And NAFTA also promised more export opportunities, which it leveled the playing field by letting small firms export to Mexico at the same cost of larger firms, by eliminating the requirement that a business establish a physical presence in Mexico in order to do the business there. The lifting of these restrictions meant that vast new markets were suddenly opened to small business that had previously done business only in the United States. They also create thousands of jobs in Mexico. For instance, cities and towns in northern Mexico, there is a place called Maquila Zones, where the majority of NAFTA-related production factories takes place, and the people there are enjoy much higher standards and higher rates of employment than most other parts of the country. And the NAFTA also have shown that the three nations combine the economy of a GDP gross domestic products of more than $20 trillion, and it have effectively improved the trade and economical growth. One of NAFTA's most active advocates was also the United States Chamber of Commerce, which promotes the interests of small firms. Enterprise also believe that the NAFTA will ensure protectionist measures and tariff-free policies, although the government not in the control of industry and business, and or the abolition of private ownership. We move on to the criticism of the NAFTA. This is are the example the of the people that critics of this agreement. For such reasons is the low labor costs in Mexico and lower price goods in the US and Canada that caused the US and agreement that caused US and Canadian companies to move their production operation in Mexico. Thus, there is an argument about exporting thousands of jobs from the United States to Mexico. And the workers in those industries, like in manufacturing sector in the US economy, suffered the heaviest jobs loss in the wake of the NAFTA. Wages are being decreased in many other sectors that don't require workers to have a college degree also. The competition from workers in Mexico who earn lower wages than the US workers on average exerted downward pressure on US wages too. Moreover, the opposition sees the Mexico is only act as a service role to Canada and United States, rather than truly making it as an equal trade partner and stronger international economic player. The companies in the United States and Canada appear to have moved into and taken advantage of the cheap labor in Mexico, and unions have also said that thousands of jobs have already been lost in the USA since the corporation in the United States may enjoy producing less labor cost items in Mexico and less restrictive environmental and labor conditions.
The opposition of NAFTA viewed the agreement as a radical profit. It means that many critics of NAFTA viewed the agreement as a radical experiment engineered by influential multinational corporations seeking to increase their profit at the expense of the ordinary citizens of the countries involved. Opposition groups argued that overarching rules imposed by NAFTA could undermine local governments by preventing them from issuing laws or regulations designed to protect the public interest. Critics also argued that the treaty would bring about a major degradation in environmental and health standards, promote the privatization and deregulation of key republic services, and displace family farmers in signatory countries. For example, NAFTA makes restrictions that might safeguard the freedom of free trade of its corporation above the rights of people in industry who breathe in a polluted atmosphere that has been the environmentalists' greatest argument. Next. Next, Mexico lacks expertise in the operation of new environmental legislation. This might deteriorate significantly in environmental and health standards and might lead to family farms being displaced to signatory nations. Maquila Zone is one of the worst places in the world that is located in northern Mexico, and Texas, Mexico has also recorded the worst cancer rate in the world. This would increase Mexico's weight as labor abuses, drug trafficking, and criminality are common in the northern border area of Mexico.
We move on to the next topic of issues in Canada. For first subtopic is the Canadian patterns of ethnic integrations. In this subtopic, we learn that Canada is one of the countries that allow many immigrants enter into their country, which results in their dynamic cultural and increased diversity of each metropolitan area, such like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. The Canadian federal government instituted policies outlawing the ethnic discrimination and protecting the rights of the immigrants. Contemporary immigrant trends for Canada exhibits a significant increase in the number of people migrating from Asia, and the Americas. The city of Vancouver and its hinterlands are the host two, for two types of contemporary Asian immigrants. Firstly, for those who settle year-round in the country, and secondly, for those who use the city and surrounding as a second home or home for their families while they are working in Hong Kong.
Next, the second issue in Canada is the centrifugal force, which is the challenges of Quebec and the rights of Indigenous Canadians. The challenge for this issue is when the country received pressure from a movement of French-speaking Canadians towards greater autonomy. 25% of Canadians are French-speaking, known as Francophones. The reason for this movement is because these protesters they feel a strong sense of separation of national group within the larger Canadian political frame because they don't share the same opinion in terms of religion, culture, and the majority of English-speaking Canadian. When new immigrants in the larger French-speaking city prefer to learn English, there is a strong fear that they will lose their cultural identity and language. The Quebec separatist movement existed in 1980 and grew in strength in the 1990s. A political party known as Parti Québécois backed the movement. In 1995, referendum was pushed and resulted almost 50% vote by Quebec residents that wants separation. Next. Several groups within the Quebec's borders, including English-speaking France, Montreal immigrants, and Indigenous Canadians, also known as the Cree, they wish to remain a part of Canada. The Cree oppose independence and have threatened to secede from any newly formed Quebec state. The movement raises the question of whether it will provide complementary unity or put Canada at disadvantage due to the country's diverse regions being separated. Canada has also grown tired of the federal government's attempts to appease Quebec's provincial government and has successfully lobbied the federal government for greater control over their resources and decisions, using the perceived concessions made to Quebec as a bargaining tool. This issue has been very important to the federal movement in Quebec because in 1973, the Canadian government agreed to negotiate land claims with organizations representing Native people. Because of overlapping land claims and the fact that bargaining involves the often opposing interests of Native groups, the federal government and the provincial government makes it difficult to resolve. Next is the subregion in North America. The subregion in North America is the United States of America and the Canada itself. So these are the list of regions in the United States of America, which is New England, Megapolis, Manufacturing Belt, Appalachia, Alaska, and Hawaii, Heartland of US, which is Midwest and Great Plains, Pacific Coast, the South, and the Western Mountains. Next. Now we look into Pacific Coast. So these are the states in Pacific Coast, which is California, Oregon, and Washington. Next. So the main economic activities in Pacific Coast is farming and plantation. The industry for this economic activity is agriculture, and it is located in California in the United States. Their economic activities Their farming and plantation activities include producing tens of thousands of uh, nuts such as almonds, pistachios, citrus crops, and numerous kind of vegetables. The agriculture output of the Central Valley alone is greater than any other individual US state. This is true because the valley covers about 11% of California's land area, and it encompasses all parts of the 19 California counties such as Butte, Colusa, Glen, Fresno, Cam. The valley is bounded by the Coast Ranges to the west and the Sierra Nevada to the east. The next economic activity is programming services, and the industry under this economic activity is software. It is located in Richmond in Washington, United States. The most famous company for this software industry is, of course, the one and only Microsoft. So Microsoft is an American MNC, and it produces computer software, consumer electronics, personal computers, and related services. It is best known for its software such as Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Windows as the operating system. The company achieved total revenue of 125,000 USD in the year 2019. Microsoft ranked number 21 in the 2020 Fortune 500 rankings of the largest United States corporations in terms of revenue. It is considered one of the big 5 companies in the US information technology industry, along with Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook. Next is financial services. The next economic activities is financial services, and the industry for this type of activity is banking. It is located in California, in Washington, and Oregon, and the most typical company known is the MUFG Union Bank. The MUFG Union Bank is an American full-service bank with 398 branches in California, Washington, and Oregon, which is wholly owned by the MUFG Bank. The bank is formerly known as Union Bank of California. North America has operations in California, Washington, and also has commercial branches in Dallas, Houston, New York City, and Chicago, as well as 2 international offices. The headquarters in New York City, MUFG Union Bank is a subsidiary of holding company MUFG Americas Holdings Corporation. On 1st April 2018, Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi UFJ Ltd. Renamed their company to MUFG Bank, and this name change aligned the bank name with the holding company name Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Corporation by removing Tokyo from the name. It is ranked as the largest in Japan and also the 4th largest in the world. It is estimated that banking assets were equally to 56% of the US economy. As of December 31, 2019, there were 5,177 commercial banks and savings institutions in the US. Next.
I will explain about the Southern United States. This is the map of the South, and this is the list of states in the South. For example, is Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia. The economic activities in the southern United States, for example, the industry of tourism, the type of activity that they are doing is services. And for example, the industry that the company that doing the industry is the Walt Disney Company. It is an American diversified multinational mass media and entertainment conglomerate headquartered at the Walt Disney Studios complex in Burbank, California. It founded on October 16, 1923 by brothers Walt and Roy O. Disney as the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. It also operates under the names the Walt Disney Studio and Walt Disney Production before officially changing its name to the Walt Disney Company in 1986. The company established itself as a leader in the American animation industry before diversifying into live-action film production, television, and theme parks. And they also have a resort that comprise 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, 27 theme resorts, and 9 non-Disney hotels, and several golf courses and other entertainment venues. Next, the industry of space. The type of activity they are doing is space services. For example, the company of Joseph L. Smith and Associates Incorporation. It established in November 1, 1961. The Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center (GSC) is NASA's Center for Human Spaceflight, originally named the Manned Spacecraft Center, where human spaceflight training, research, and flight control are conducted. It was built and leased to NASA by Joseph L. Smith and Associates Incorporation. It was renamed in honor of the late U.S. President and Texas native Lyndon B. Johnson by an act of the U.S. Senate on February 19, 1973. It consists of a complex of 100 buildings constructed on 1,620 acres in the Clear Lake area of Houston, which acquired the official nicknames of Space City in 1967. The center is home of NASA's Astronaut Corps and is responsible for training astronauts from both the U.S. and its international partners. For the next type of activity in southern U.S. is manufactures and tire supplies under the industry of manufacturing. For example, the company of Michelin North American Incorporation. It is a French multinational tire manufacturing company, and they are the largest tire manufacturer in the world before the Bridgestone and larger than the both Goodyear and Continental Company. In addition to the Michelin brand, it also owns the Kleber Tires Company, which is Unireal, Goodrich Tire Company, and many more. Michelin is also notable for its red and green travel guides, its road map, the Michelin stars that the Red Guide awards to restaurants for their cooking, and for its company mascot Bibendum, colloquially known as the Michelin Man. Michelin's numerous inventions also include the removable tire, the funeral, which is a tire for rubber-tired metros, and the radial tire. They also offer tire for passenger cars, sport utility vehicle, light truck, and recreational vehicles.
Next is the Western Mountains of United States. Next. So this is the map for Western Mountains. Next. Now these are the states, the list of states in Western Mountains, which is Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, and Alright, so the economic activity in the Western Mountain, the most common economic activities in Western Mountain is hotel and tourism. It is located in northern Utah, specifically in Salt Lake City, Park City, Ogden, and Provo. The Utah ski resorts are primarily located in northern Utah near Salt Lake City, Park City, Ogden, and Provo. Between 2007 and 2011, Deer Valley in Park City has been ranked the top ski resort in North America in a survey organized by Ski Magazine. One of the attraction for this economic activity is that it is six of the top 10 resorts deemed as the most accessible, and 6 of the top 10 with the best snow conditions where it is located in Utah. Former Olympic venues, including the Utah Olympic Park and Utah Olympic Oval, are still in operation for training and competition, and allows the public to participate in numerous activities including ski jumping, bobsleigh, and speed skating. It is located close to International Airport and to other ski resorts in North Utah, which skiers can ski in several areas in a day. Thus, the northern ski resorts are most favored place to ski amongst visitors. Next. The next economic activities is manufacturing. The type of activities is wholesale trade, retail and consumer services, clothing and clothing accessories. The location for this company is doing business worldwide, and it is headquartered based in Newark, Colorado in US. The most common company for manufacturing is Crocs, which they produce shoes and shoes accessories. Crocs Incorporation is an American company that is based in Newark, Colorado, that manufactures and markets the Crocs brands of foam clogs, the design of which was acquired from a company called Foam Creations based in Quebec City in Canada. It was founded by Lyndon Duke Hanson and George Bodeker Jr., and the company has established a considerable following of American middle school and high school students, with many opting for Crocs to use as school shoes for the school day. Next, some facts about the Crocs is that Crocs has launched a free pair of healthcare in response to the coronavirus pandemic, which they offer a free pair for its comfort shoes to the healthcare worker. Crocs has sent 100,000 pairs of shoes to hospitals for distribution to the staff. Colorado manufacturing output is strong and keep on growing, where it started from 15 billion USD in 2005. Next. The next economic activity is high-tech production. It is located in Boise in Idaho, and the most common company for this type of activity is Micron Technology Incorporation. Micron Technology Incorporation is an American producer of computer memory and computer data storage, such as flash memory, USB drive, and pen drive. It is headquartered in Boise in Idaho, and the consumer products are marketed under the brand Crucial and Ballistics. Micron and Intel together created IM Flash Technologies, which produce NAND flash memory. It is a type of non-volatile volatile storage technology that does not require power to retain data. The only Micron technology manufacturer in US of dynamic random access memory chips. It is a type of random access semiconductor memory that stores each bit of data in a memory cell consisting of a tiny capacitor in a transitive, both typically based on metal oxide semiconductor technology. Idaho has the biggest science and technology industry, which next. Idaho has the biggest science and technology industry, which is a major facility is run by Hewlett-Packard, largely for manufacture of laserjet printers. Investment in technology and high-tech industry is the most highly focused industry in Idaho, including Hewlett-Packard Idacorp Incorporation. Idaho provided in 2018, Idaho provided 1,500 new positions, a 3% increase over 2017 and 53,000 employees in this industry in 2019. That's all. Next. That's all. Thank you.